Alright, what's up everyone? So if you're an independent comic book creator or want to be one, stick around. In this video I'm going to explain how you as a creator can find and target your audience, and along the way I'm going to clarify who my audience is. That way we can more clearly narrow down your audience, depending on what type of indie comic creator you are. And I break indie comic creators into 3 different groups. And you may not like it, but I promise these are loose groups, and not everybody fits neatly into one category. But this is just for simplicity, not to really judge. And as you'll see in the whole second half, regardless of which group you're in, your audience breaks down in the same way. It just varies by levels of magnitude, which you'll see what I'm talking about as we get to later in the video. So if that sounds interesting, just stay tuned. And so, those unaware of me, I am Lord Max Hoven. I'm a comic writer and film producer. I co-wrote Liquid Kill, which is still releasing monthly in shops with Whatnot Publishing. The trade paperback for Volume 1 will be out in the fall 2023. And I also co-wrote It Eats What Feeds It. It was a hit graphic novel which came out in 2020 from Scout Comics. All the links to all my work is at my website, www.hovencrow.com, which is in the description. So like and subscribe and comment if you like my content or my comics or movies or whatever. And yeah, that means a lot to me if you do. I do read every comment, or as of now, good or bad, regardless. So I'm just going to jump right in. Here are the 3 categories of indie comic creators as I define them. So number 1 is mainstream direct market creators. Number 2 is small press direct market creators. And number 3 is self-published creators. If I were to make a Venn diagram of these groups, the one thing that they all have in common, for my definition, is that they all focus on creator-owned comic books. That means every creator in these groups writes and owns the rights to their stories and books. The opposite of this would be a creator who writes and or draws for existing IP, usually mainstream IP like Marvel, DC, video games, and movies. So the reason I bring this up first is because I feel like when most people are broadly talking about indie comics, they're really just referring to everything that's creator owned. So in the first bucket, you'll have like the ones that my first bucket is mainstream direct market creators. So when I say mainstream, I mean quite specifically someone who publishes their stories with one of the top 3 indie comic book publishers within the direct market. And this would include anyone who has at least one series published by the top 3 as I define them as of now. These can change, and 3 can expand to 5, but in general it's like Image, Dark Horse, or Boom Studios. So like someone who's published by one of those, and even Image is like there's a wide variance there, but these are like what I define them as like mainstream direct market creators. And the direct market is people that go their books are primarily, if not entirely, published through comic book shops and bookstores, through usually a publisher. And like with this mainstream group, it's one of these top 3 publishers that's not Marvel or DC. The biggest publishers that publish creator-owned comics, usually by sales, are like I defined, Image, Dark Horse, and Boom. But those change depending. There's some that are rising, and so it's not just those 3. There's other ones that can fill those slots. But in general, I think you get what I'm saying. So I hear people sometimes refer to indie comics as essentially anyone other than Marvel or DC. And because of that, I like to indicate that mainstream indie publishers are still very big in comparison to the rest of indie publishers. The top 3 to 5 indie publishers make up probably close to 80% of the market share of even just the broad indie comic space. So probably the top 3 take 80% of the market, and then the next 5 to 10 publishers only account for about 20% of like the total market of people that buy independent comic books, which is important to know, as you'll see in the second half of this video where I go over your audience. This leads to the second category that I define: small press direct market creators. And I would fall into this category. These are creators who primarily produce creator-owned comics that are sold and promoted in the comic book shops under small press publishers. And these publishers would include everyone from Vault, Whatnot, Scout, Mad Cave, Sumerian, Aftershock, Antarctic, Band of Bards, etc. The third category is what I call self-published creators. And this consists primarily of creators who have their own very small publishing company, usually self-publishing their own comics and selling and promoting them via Kickstarter or another crowdfunding platform. Or those who are entirely online, such as webcomic creators. Now, most creators don't fit neatly into one category. I know this. So many small press direct market creators also self-publish comics and promote them on Kickstarter as well. And also mainstream creators also self-publish comics too, either on Kickstarter or through Substack, etc. Or, there's mainstream publishers that have plenty of books with small press publishers, and so on. So a lot of people are a blend of all three. However, you'll notice that each of most people can more primarily fall into one of the three, or most of their work is like the bulk of where they're getting their income is from one of these groups. And so like trying to find your audience depends on which group you're in. However, I've somewhat come up with, it's not like entirely my idea. This is actually kind of just basic business, but I'm narrowing it down to what I call the rules of magnitude and your audience. And it's the same no matter which, what kind of indie comic creator you're in. So the point of breaking things down like I'm about to is so that you can more clearly define your own audience and get in front of them, and how to get in front of them, and sort of who is more important and how to and like which step to take. Okay? So like I was saying, regardless of how you publish, either through the direct market or through crowdfunding, your audience can be broken down into 4 categories at different levels of magnitude, and they all work in your advantage if you go about them and treat them accordingly. And I'll explain this starting with your most important group. The first one is what we call your team. And it's the smallest group. It's usually about 1 to 10 people. The smallest is yourself might be your team. And usually it can go up to about 10. This is your close friends and family. This is the group that you can always count on to buy everything you release. Not only that, this is your hype squad. This is the group who always buys your book on day 1 of a Kickstarter campaign. This is the group who always pre-orders your book through comic shops. They always retweet and like your Instagram posts. They blog about your content. They share your books at church or college or whatever. They are a part of your team. They are your team. The key aspect of this group is that they build momentum, allowing you to gain traction online and in your community, which can then spark the eyeballs of the second group. And the second group is another level of magnitude up. And it's usually around 100 people, or that's what you want to get it to. And this group is how I define other creators and the indie comic commentators. This group may not be there on day 1 of your campaign or always pre-order your book, but this group almost always buys your book at some point, or at least will give it a try. And if you can have a strong relationship with this group and build it up, they can ultimately be as strong as your first group. And when you have 100 people on your hype team, it's a big deal. So it's important that you build this group up over time. This is kind of your core group that you're slowly building a relationship with. So this is like, it's usually about the same for everybody, regardless of whether you're doing like Kickstarter or through the direct market. But over time, you want to make this group stronger, the bond stronger. So this is all the artists and writers that you have a relationship. It's all the comic book bloggers. It's all the comic book reviewers. It's other YouTubers like me. It's the comics Twitter crowd. It's the people who follow indie comic groups on Facebook groups and Discord groups. And it's essentially the hardcore indie comics crowd and comic creators who are public about their interests and work. And finding this group is probably one of the easiest, because anywhere you go, you just hashtag indie comics or, comics, and you'll find them. Creator-owned or comic book creators. And, of course, just other artists and writers looking for work. Those first two are fairly clearly like 1 to 10, 10 to 100. These next two groups are on a sliding scale of magnitude, sort of in the same way, but more expansive. So this next group of people, is what I define as your publisher, or at least your publisher's audience, and comic book speculators. Now, if you're self-publishing, this would include the crowdfunding platform you're on, like your publisher would be Kickstarter or Indiegogo. If you're going through the direct market, this would be your publisher, be it Image or Dark Horse or Scout or Mad Cave or whatever. And this group is usually in the thousands, with a core readership of usually about 1 to 10,000 people. And your goal is to pull at least 1,000 readers and speculators from this group. In the direct market, this is usually your base case. Even the smallest publishers can usually get at least 1,000 people to regularly buy their books. If you're on Kickstarter, though, 1K is quite high. So more realistically, this number is like 100. Because like I was saying, the levels of magnitude change. Because like on Kickstarter, there's just less eyeballs as there are like in the entire comics community. So by now, you should have your hype team of about 10 people building momentum, which should then get the attention of other creators and commentators. And if you add in reviewers and commentators, this should be around 100 people paying attention to your book and like your content that you're posting about it, your basic marketing. And this bubbling and talking should then convince the audience of your publisher to at least pay attention to your book. And that should get the attention of speculators, which can give even more momentum to your book. And once you've got all that bubbling and you've gotten everyone's attention in this category, your final goal is to reach the final group of like 10 to 100,000 readers. And this one's obviously the toughest. This is the mainstream crowd, or what I call the greater genre crowd. Breaking into this group is when your book breaks out of the comic book community and into the greater pop culture community. It's when you get mainstream press. It's when not just like comic reviewers or like the commentators are talking about you, but your local newspaper or the main newspaper or like I was saying, actual like pop culture websites are talking about you. And this happens through the same kind of methods every time. You see it all the time. This is when your book has a celebrity attached, like Wesley Snipes or Keanu Reeves, as we've seen. It's when your book gets optioned for a film or becomes a TV series. It's when your book, your horror comic series is no longer just a hit in the comic community, but amongst all horror fans. Same if it's a sci-fi. It's if your characters are so recognizable that people start to draw them as graffiti or get tattoos of them or wear your t-shirts because the character is so iconic. Hitting this bigger group often takes a combination of hard work and hustle and primarily luck. So that's the gist of it. That's how I broadly define the comics audience and how it should relate to you as an indie comic creator and how you should treat these groups and overall market to them. and I can give more detailed advice of step by step how to do this. And if you guys are interested in that, let me know. But for now, that's really all. This is really all I have. Just leave me, notes in the comments if or any questions you have. Otherwise, that's really all I got. Thanks, everybody. Just like and subscribe, and let me know if you have any other video requests or questions about comics writing or film producing on a small scale. All right, thanks, everybody. Bye.